in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you. In the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you.
Good evening, everybody. And yes, we are back, myself and Jason.
We're here.
We are finally back. As
Praise
I
the Lord.
at home, I feel a lot more safer on on YouTube. And yes, we are back. It's
Do you?
absolutely.
Do you really feel safer on YouTube? Oh.
I feel more at home here, Jason. Yes, we are back, and good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this. We're only doing this for 1 hour, everybody. We're only here just to say we're back, basically. But Jason, we are back, my friend, and you've got a lot of celebrating after last night, my friend. But more importantly, who's in the chat? Who's here to celebrate our return?
Well, I've only got about 4 people in the chat at the moment. I think people have forgotten about us on YouTube. Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing. I hope you're doing really well. I hope all the points came to you the past weekend, and you got Jammy with owning maybe Wilfried Zaha or maybe Gaeta in your team. You know, you never know. Things like that may happen to 1 or 2 individuals in the FPL community, mightn't they, Steve-O? It's been a very frustrating month, really, of us being basically blacklisted from streaming on YouTube for a reason that we had absolutely no control about. The good news is that they had literally no evidence to suggest that we were broadcasting anything copyrighted. That's why we're back. And if you've stuck with us through our Twitch escapades, we will still be broadcasting on Twitch for the weekend's fixtures live, doing a live FPL Saturday FPL live on Twitch. And thank you ever so much for all the well wishes, guys. We've got It's Raw 12G in chat, Vish, Ryan Seachern, King Hurl, Alex the Kids in chat, Hick76, Yassine Klausch, Michael Svedin, Dan Bull's in chat. Hey Dan, how you doing, buddy? We've got Brian Blair, we've got Rohit Shinglade in chat, we've got Jacko, FPL Penguin. We've got the members here. We've got the members. Steve-O, do you remember that? YouTube members. We've got them here.
Yeah.
We've got Michael Foley. We got who else? Tobias. Hello, Tobias. Hello, Simon. Hello, Brew. Hello, Jay. Hello, Chelsea Flyer. Top Gunner, FPL Top Gunner, and Uncle GCTV. Welcome, everybody to the stream this evening. This is just to say we're back. We're ready to go. It's the busiest time of the year, FPL wise. We're coming up to this really awesome time where we're gonna have fixture congestion. We're gonna have hopefully not that much rotation. We're gonna have Boxing Day on Amazon Prime, guys. That's gonna be amazing. We're gonna have correspondence again. You know, hopefully we'll have about G Wiz, James Bang, others, Boona maybe coming on with us on that game week. But Steve-O, it's been a long time coming. I was worried that they'd be dragging their heels. And do you know what? YouTube didn't even let us know we had our streaming privileges back. They didn't even email me to say, yeah, do you know what? We've looked into this and here you go, guys. You can stream back on YouTube. The only reason I knew is because Dan Bull, who's in chat now, he messaged me saying, Jace, do you know that your Man City Chelsea videos now live to watch? And I'm like, what? And so that's the only reason why I knew that we were back. So, thanks YouTube. Just wanted to throw that one out there. But anyway, James. Hey, James. How you doing, man? How you doing up in the early hours? Firetog there. Thank you very much, guys. Yes, we'll just gloss over what the events that happened last night. I needed a miracle to pull away.
Got one?
I prayed to the FPL gods, Steve-O. You may laugh, but they answered my prayers again. I don't know if your water's tasting nice, mate, but I sacrificed your water bottle to the FPL gods. So there we go. It paid off. Obviously, Zaha getting that goal and Gaeta, despite conceding, getting bonus 3. We're coming again, and the YouTube family are having a Vardy party. We're having a Vardy party, yes, absolutely. Even though I didn't captain Vardy, everyone's been benefiting from Jamie Vardy, and we're all having a big party. Who else we got in chat? We got hello, Johnny Brofo. How you doing, Johnny? Hamad. We are back. Yes, we are back, Mark. We are back. So yes, again, for those of you just joining, this is just going to be a basically 45 an hour long stream, just to chat about the channel really, and to say we're back now. And Steve-O, have we actually got a plan for this stream tonight? I mean,
we could. In all seriousness, we could go over the two mini leagues that we
could.
The
And
one that we take seriously,
if
and the other one, which is
if Llama's here, we can possibly look at
the Champions League.
The Champions League as well, because
I agree.
we need to start thinking about that, because we are, even though it's we think it may be a while away, we still need to get that draw done. So again, we'll talk to Llama. I've been at work all day. I finished work at 5:30. I got home at 6:00. It's been a mad rush. Got myself something to eat. Said hello to the little one. But I knew that I needed to come on and talk to you guys, see you guys in chat, speak to you, Steve-O, because believe it or not, guys, the only time I actually speak to Steve-O is actually when we stream, because we have opposite lifestyles. We're not only opposite lifestyles, but we're opposite in every way. And really, we just chat before for about, 30 seconds, 1 minute, and then we chat for about 2-3 minutes after. So this is pretty much our correspondence here, and we do it live. I'm planning not to take a hit. Jason is convincing me I should do a -16 very soon. Mark, I mean, -16s aren't always. I would say the majority of times they are more of a risk than they pay off, and I think that you really do have to go in with the mindset that you are putting everything on the line when you do a -16. Depends who you're bringing in, though. Of course, it does depend who you're bringing in. Lots of people. I'm seeing people axing their Liverpool players. I'm seeing people jumping on KDB now. He's got that massive point return, and ditching their Tottenham players because all of a sudden Tottenham are rubbish. They can't do anything. And I can possibly see that backfiring on a few people. I really can. Am I feeling better? Does it sound? I sound better than last stream. I think I do. It's raw. I'm feeling a lot better. Still got a bit of a nose clogging up in the nose, but it's the back end. I'm over the mountain. Everything seems to be good. Thoughts on United Everton game? I'm captaining Marcus Rashford, Vish, if that's going to answer your question. Did Trent Alexander-Arnold to Baldock yesterday, says the Don. Ooh, interesting. When do we get the second wild card? January the 1st, Robert Dinsmore. I brought in Gary Cahill. That's Friday, only for him to get crocked again. Yes. Why did you bring in Gary Cahill? That's the question. Let's talk. Andy did a -8 and brought in 3 defenders. Interesting. He's obviously thinking there's going to be clean sheets in the game week 18 then. Captain choice is a difficult one. No, it's really good. I like difficult captain choices. I hate it when the majority of the game captain one player. Just sorted out my coffee with the lunch with a touch of Bailey's, ready for the stream, says Dale Benamy in chat.
Yeah, he's doing exceedingly well, Jason, in the Torbay Elite. He's number 1, 40,000th in the world. So,
yes.
That's brilliant.
Let's get your live reaction to that Monday night game. Obviously, Crystal Palace Brighton.
Well, the realities of this, I woke up at 3:00 in the morning, had my usual porridge and whatever, and then I was just like, oh yeah, there was a game on last night. Checked, and I just rolled my eyes when I saw Zaha. But then that's the Guaita, 8 points, like 3 bonus and 9 saves.
Honestly, he had like 6 saves in the first 30 minutes.
Just unbelievable. Just honestly, and then my initial reaction then was just like, what on earth does Jason do to get these? Not necessarily the Zaha goal was very, very good, but it's just the Guaita.
Well, the thing is, right, that Zaha is not worth a spot in my team. I don't want to have him going forward, really, but it's a necessary evil, I'm afraid, at the moment. Unless I take a minus, well, I don't need to take it. I could do a straight swap him out, but who would I bring in? That's the question. Richarlison I could bring in, but then I would have to do a -4. I'm not doing -4 for Richarlison. Is that an awkward price point? Grealish? Do I really want Grealish on my team? I don't know about that. The new Lord Guaita, absolutely. Double Bellamy in chat. Yes, Simon and Dale in chat. Got Guy to just because Jason made a pact with the FPL gods, says Azhar in chat. I did make a pact with the FPL gods. The FPL gods have saved me. They've saved me from the embarrassment of taking KDB out for Son, essentially. But it's keep or sell Tomori, says Rohit. I would. Have you got pressing issues elsewhere? Really, is the question. Fleck, says Nasty Balls. If you've got Fleck in, then you're loving life. I got 3 Liverpool and all my chips. Any suggestion on my best move? Says Mark Esbatch in chat. 3 Liverpool and all your chips. Do you really want to be spending chips, spending a wild card or a free hit on a blank game week for one team?
Oh, talking of, that's actually quite an interesting point. Your thoughts on people potentially free hitting? I believe that Dan Bull, he's apparently going to be free hitting this week. What are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, I still got a bit of a cold. Cough. Thoughts of a free hit in this game week? Waste. A waste because of 2 things. One, because it's basically you're doing it because of Liverpool, and the other reason is the fixtures are rubbish. So you've not got many favourable, if at all that many. Well, if we go for the fixtures very quickly, I mean, if you're going to free hit, where are you thinking the goals are going to come from, guys? That's the question. You're going to hit the free hit button, right? I would be like, right, Man City, Leicester. Well, okay, that could either be end to end open game, or it could be Leicester sitting back, Man City breaking them down, or it could be the other way around, which I don't think it would be.
And Leicester's history versus City is actually very good.
I can see that being a 1-1 or a 2-1 to one of each team. I don't think it's going to be goals galore. I certainly don't think that people shipping out Son or Mane for KDB are necessarily making the right choice instantly. I mean, I think that a lot of the sentiment comes from the performance, at the weekend. But I think looking at those fixtures, I wouldn't be doing a free hit. I really wouldn't be doing a free hit. I mean, I would be like, right, do what I've done. I've got Mousset. I've got I've got Aurier, I know, but I've got Aurier and Mousset playing, and I've benched Mane and Trent Alexander-Arnold. So yes, I could just do a minus. Oh, I could just do a transfer. I don't need to do a -4. I could just do a transfer, really. I could just go Alexander-Arnold out, maybe bring Doherty in or something like that. Wolves away at Norwich. Norwich is back on the scoring form now. Where's the clean sheets for you in those fixtures, Steve-O?
Well, I mean, you could be looking at, for example, Sheffield United away at Brighton, Newcastle, Crystal Palace, that's got 0-0 written all over it. Aston Villa, Southampton. Aston Villa could keep a clean sheet against them. Do you know what? In all seriousness, I'm considering... So
you're thinking one of Aston Villa, Palace, Newcastle, or
Watford. I think, or Watford and Man U. I think Watford and Man U's got... Yeah, I'm predicting either 0-0, 1-1 or 2-1 either way, and mainly in Watford's favour, genuinely. I think there could be a bit of an upset. Yeah, I think there could be an upset in that particular game. Yeah, genuinely. You lot don't like playing teams like that. Watford, they've got a new manager. They played well against Liverpool, could be pushed to say they're unlucky not to get anything at Anfield. And I honestly think that there could be a bit of an upset in that particular game. And hear this warning, Rashford captainers. I don't think so. I think the best game to captain is the Spurs game. Spurs against Chelsea. That's got goals galore written all over it.
We'll have to wait and see. I mean, the armband is on Rashford at the moment, but I haven't really thought about it that much. We got we've got some decent games, haven't we? On the weekend, we've got Man City, Leicester. We've got, in terms of a non-FPL perspective, we've got some quite nice games there. Spurs, Chelsea, even the Everton Arsenal game. I think that Everton Arsenal game could be a bit of a cracker. I think Richarlison might be a good one to bring in. He's been floating under the radar, getting those returns, and I think against Arsenal, I think I could score a hat trick against Arsenal. Really do. We'll just hang around in the goal. In the penalty area, majority of the game, I'll probably end up scoring a few. Grealish won't take the next penalty, says Simon Bellamy. He seems to know that Grealish is off penalties for some reason. I don't know. Is that been confirmed? I don't know about that. I heard Mings could still be out this weekend. Potentially. We'll have to wait for the press conferences. Ancelotti is with Everton. Is that true?
I can't. No, it's apparently he's in talks, but Everton haven't agreed yet with him. I just think that's ludicrous, personally.
Wow, that's just another level, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Incredible.
I mean,
If he goes
fair
to
play to Everton if they manage to get Ancelotti. Put it that way. Brought Richarlison in. Says Matt Henley for a 1 week punt, surely because he's playing Arsenal. I can completely see the logic. If I could do a straight swap, Richarlison in for Zaha. God, my mind was playing tricks on me. Then I would, but I can't. Grealish, Richarlison, and Sterling on a 4 yellows. Think Richarlison aiming for the Boxing Day off. I don't know. About that. I don't think players will aim to get yellow cards before Boxing Day. To be honest with you, I'm triple captaining. You're triple captaining who? Nasty balls. Who are you going to triple captain? Touch like a trampoline, says Pete Smith in chat. Not sure you'd score a hat trick anymore, Jay. Oh yeah, don't get me started on that one. You're triple captaining me. Okay, well yeah, triple captaining me. That'd be quite interesting, wouldn't it? One day we may end up having real life football games where we can play the fancy game with us as real players. That'd be pretty insane, wouldn't it? Marshall loves a Boxing Day off, says Johnny Profo.
Have you seen what FPL Boone has just written there?
Where's that? I kid you not. I've already used my 2 free transfers and I've done Salah and Wickham to Rashford and Martial. I'm now very tempted to buy Vardy and Trent to Kane and Doherty or Vertonghen for a -8. Go on, shoot me down. I mean, Boona, you've made serious ground over the last, few days. And honestly, I don't like those moves. But if you want to do them, go ahead. Anything?
This is what we want to hear.
Yeah,
Yes.
Go ahead, mate. As a rival, bloody good moves, mate. Bloody good moves. Go on, take that -8. Why don't you just stop there? Go to -12 while you're at it. Bring in Rico. Doherty, good 1 week option, says Simon Bellamy. For 1 week, again, for a free hit maybe, but if you're only bringing him in for 1 week, then you're just wasting a transfer. I might captain Richarlison now, but I do hate captaining a player on the early Saturday kickoffs. It's that superstition of the early kickoffs.
Paid off for Boona.
Paid off. It did pay off for Boona. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you ever so much for the welcome. Hello, Harry Hiroki too. Christmas Kane is a different breed, says Vish. I'm not confident in Kane at all, Steve-O. Steve-O, what about you?
Waste of space.
Absolutely waste of money. I'm sorry.
I'll tell you who I'm tempted on doing once they're all back is going back to a 3-5-2 and getting rid of Ali and Rashford for Salah and whoever. But getting rid
Salah,
of somebody, and
we saw it last year, didn't we? When Salah started getting back in form, boom, 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 and everyone was like, "Oh, should I get him? Shouldn't I?" Missed out lots of points. I think that definitely Mohamed Salah, game week 19, game week 20 onwards, definitely worth looking at. Steve-O, have you seen Sky Bet's festive special? Kane to score 5 goals over the next.
I saw Boona tweet this about this. I think it's a great bet.
Kane's to score 5 goals over the 4 festive fixtures, 10-1. Okay, we do not endorse gambling, but for anyone that does wish to partake in a holiday season bet, may the best of luck be with you.
Talking of betting, Jason, remind everybody your little fun bet with Phil regarding Abraham and what it was again.
I don't remember that. Sorry. Can we move on? FPL Penguin, Jason. I captain Tammy versus Everton. What a mistake. Oh. Goals will come for Chelsea. All right? They will come for Chelsea. I don't know why they didn't go in that game. I mean, I'm grateful because I don't own Tammy Abraham, but I do think that Tammy Abraham will score a hatful of goals over this festive period. Obviously, 1 game down. Was it 5 more to go now? He needs to get... Was it 6 goals? I think I can't remember now.
Yeah, I think it was 6 goals up till next year, January, when Phil said he was trash.
Yeah, he did. I tell you what, Phil could end up £10 poorer. United have got a nice couple of fixtures like all right, Wan-Bissaka, Jacko. He's a brilliant defender, but with your FPL goggles on, United aren't keeping clean sheets. So you've got to be really careful with Man United. Go to Man United at your own peril, okay? If you want to do it as a punt, go ahead. But I wouldn't be, even as a United fan, I do not expect United to keep clean sheets. They just always do make mistakes.
By the way, let me just make this announcement now. If anybody wants to come live on air, we're only on for another 20 odd minutes or so. By all means, the waiting room is available. So you can come live on air. Join in the conversation with myself and Jason. Daily Llama, I know you're here. If you want to come on air and tell everybody about the Champions League tournament that we are now thinking about doing this draft and everything. We're going to work out a way of drawing it on air as well, where we can literally put all the names in the hat, do a graphic in the middle, just in the middle here. Get rid of the FPL website and just put the graphic in, and then we can draw the names. That's going to be really exciting. And I know how much time and effort that Daily Llama is put in, and it's only right and true and proper that he's here with us while we do that draw. So we will work on it, and we'll plan it as well. We're not going to. I think it would be a bad mistake just doing it on a whim. We need to plan it. So we'll get our heads together very, very soon, and we will do a meeting and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it, Daily Llama. Cameron Rawcliffe is just come in chat, and just a quick special mention to how well he's doing in the Elite FPL Community League, which is the free one. He's dropped down to second, unfortunately, but let's bring this up. Actually, let's bring it up because notable mentions, like you said, Dale Bellamy in the chat at the moment, top of the Torbay Elite Mini League. Well done to Dale Bellamy. Just quickly saying, Captain Vardy got a decent triple captain Vardy. Sorry, 80 points. Well done to you. You got a decent score there, and you are now top of the mini league. So well done, it's paid off. Let's go down to let's quickly just go over the community league. The Elite FPL Community League. It's a name that I'm familiar with. Cameron Rawcliffe now has been taken to second. Geordie Christ, top of that. All hail King Kane. Obviously, we're just talking about Kane doesn't have him in his team. Funny that. Captain Vardy, 69 points. Let's go back into the Community League and see FPL Kid, also known as Cameron Rawcliffe. 51. Bit of a disappointing game week, really. And the disappointment stems purely from the fact that he had Ali, Maddison and Son in his midfield with Rashford. I mean, it's very unfortunate because on paper that team is solid. It's just very, very unfortunate. You had Mane as well. He had a goal disallowed, rightfully or wrongfully, whichever way you stand on that. I think it's very harsh. Sorry, Stevie. No, I was just going to say regarding mini leagues and in the cash mini league. Obviously, you had Zaha and Guaita getting you 16. Was it 16 points yesterday? And yet you dropped. I mean, doesn't that just tell you how? Doesn't it just tell you how hard the cash mini league is?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The cash mini league is ridiculous. Let's be honest. It's full of freaks of nature, like you like to say, who are dedicated to FPL in ways that just fascinates me. And I just think that if I can get a green arrow from now until February, then I'm loving life. But it'd be nice. It would be nice. So yes, well done to Cameron Rawcliffe for being so high. We'll just quickly go over the Elite FPL Challenge League, obviously the Cash League, Elite FPL Cash League. Juggernauts top of the Aman Dillon dropping down to second. Juggernauts taking the spot. Well done to Juggernauts if you're watching or watching on the replay. He had a solid game week. Captained who, Steve-O? The one and only Mohamed Salah. Yeah. And also has Kevin De Bruyne in his chat in his team as well, and could withstand 2 points from Son, Martial, Ings. I mean, Chilwell getting 2, Patricio getting 2. The fact he got 89 points and 3-5 players getting 2 points, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. 5 players getting 2 points, he still gets 89 points. Top of the Cash League. Well done to Juggernauts.
Can we bring in Dan?
Of course we can.
He's in the waiting room. Bring in Dan, and we'll talk to him about Arsenal.
Dan, the man. I hear a little dicky bird tells me, not too far away, that Olympique Bologna Sorry, butchering the name. I do appreciate that you probably don't like that, but or maybe after a new manager. What was this all about, Dan? Whereabouts are you in the Torbes Elite? There you are. It's dropped a bit, but I'll bring your team up now. I know you probably don't want to see it, but what's gone wrong, Dan?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. No, it was just I had this weird thought in my head that maybe because of all these managerial changes, maybe I should get a new manager. Or have like a co-manager to stop me making all these crap decisions. But bit of a wacky idea. But if any FPL managers are out there and they fancy being my assistant manager, then just drop us a DM on Instagram. But no, I mean, jokes aside, I think the last, actually not the last game. I mean, the last game was good, but out of the last 4 or 5 game weeks, I've had maybe one good game week. So it's just like the season was going all right, and then captaincy choices have just let me down. But this week, obviously, as you can see, my midfield is just like I kept faith with Pulisic, and that has just punished me over the last few weeks badly.
Yeah, I mean, he's...
And look at my bench as well. Have you seen my bench?
Yes.
Well, it's the Greenwood. I mean, that's a question about Greenwood. I mean, I can see people, who haven't used their wildcard possibly bringing him in still again. I think Greenwood's going to get minutes. I really, really do. He's earned them. He's going to get minutes, and for that price point, I think it's a no-brainer. Having him in on your bench.
Yeah, because obviously he scored twice against AZ Alkmaar last Thursday.
Yeah,
and I know we always say you should always listen to fans of other teams that do the eye test, that watch their teams. And on the Friday, I was at the pharmacy and I saw my friend and he was like, "Oh, Greenwood's the new Van Persie." I literally burst out laughing. But when Greenwood scored that goal, Gary Neville actually did compare him to Van Persie, and I could kind of see what he meant by his
composure and his accuracy.
The way he leans back and his sort of physique as well, and that technique, and I can kind of see the comparison and the way he strikes the ball.
Listen, he's really young. He's really young, and he needs to make sure his feet are firmly on the ground. That's all I will say on that. And I just want to quickly answer a question from Jamadiah in chat. Congrats, guys. Really happy for you. Question, though. Does this mean that this is the end of your Twitch endeavor? No, it doesn't. Jamadiah, it does not mean that. It just means that we are celebrating being back on YouTube Live. We are going to have a plan in process. We're going to be live streaming the games this weekend on Twitch. Boxing Day will be a different story, but from this weekend we'll be doing all the live streams on Twitch, and we'll re-upload those after 24 hours.
That's the match ones.
That's the match live stream. So the previews and the reaction streams, the Sunday surgery will still be on YouTube, but the FPL live games will be on Twitch.
Yeah, we find it more safer, shall we say.
We find it safer from people that may wish to report our channel. But anyway, sorry. So we've got you here, Dan, and so plans afoot. Then, are you Tammy Abraham? What's happening with Tammy Abraham?
You sent me a WhatsApp, and you said you're going to possibly free hit this weekend. Are you still thinking it or not?
Yeah, I'm still thinking of doing it because, like I say, I look at my team at the moment, and there's that cliche fires to put out. Pulisic, maybe Ali.
Ali?
Possibly. Looking at my defence as well, like Tomori. I don't know, there's just an imbalance in my team. And I also think, obviously with this Club World Champions Cup and 2 Liverpool players, like, I can't really have players not playing. So it's either an 8-point hit or a free hit. So I've got to kind of like figure out and look at some drafts and think which is going to be the more effective. But it's just the thing with FPL is we're doing my head in the last couple of weeks, because like I saw that Chelsea lost to Bournemouth. Now, a normal me would be like jumping for joy, happy, because I hate Chelsea. I love Bournemouth, but all I could think was, I bought Tammy Abraham in and I got Pulisic still. So I couldn't even enjoy that in the moment. You know what I mean?
One of our, obviously, FPL Booner, and his attitude has been a bit like mine, really, which is I don't care. I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want, and it's paid off for Booner. Have you thought about just thinking, do you know what? I just don't care anymore and just do whatever you like rather than going through like the sheep mentality, the herd mentality.
Yes,
Follow
well, no, it's interesting you say that because that's what's happened. So the last 2 game weeks, so the previous game week I was going to captain Son, I didn't, but I vice captained Ali, so it was actually okay. But this game week just gone, the week leading up to it, I was like, oh, should I bring in Zaha? Genuinely thought that, and I didn't. I also thought, oh, look at how Salah's performed in Champions League. Why don't I just take out... I know it sounds a bit mad. Take out Mane, bring in Salah, captain him, look at his history against Watford. It's like, no, Dan, be sensible. Bring in Tammy Abraham because Bournemouth have got lots of injuries in defence. Surely good old Tammy's going to do me well. And it looks like Phil was right about him, but obviously it's not just up to Abraham.
Wow.
So there is kind of that attitude you get. Well, this time last year, I actually didn't bother doing any transfers and I got like...
Well, I was just
points.
about to say that. I was just about to say it to you. That team, I mean, okay, you've got the Mane Trent situation there. You may want to just get rid of one of them. Maybe Trent or something if you've got money tied in with Mane. And then just get a decent defender in and play the 4-4-2 or the 3-4-3 or whatever. But I just think that to be honest with you, if you started taking out the likes of Abraham, like Pulisic, that's got the potential to really bite you. It really has.
Yeah.
I mean, they've still got good fixtures, and they aren't bad players. I just think Pulisic's been unlucky. I mean, it's just a case of if Abraham could start, getting a few goals, it'd be quite nice, wouldn't it? I've got faith in Abraham. It's not obviously not all his fault, but that was just a bit of a knee-jerk comment. But if you look at Pulisic, it's like 3 points, 2 points, 2 points, 2 points, 2 points. He hasn't got any decent returns since game week 12 against Palace. Now, my thinking was, even though I was getting really impatient with him, is that, well, hold on, he's at home against, no disrespect, but a mid-table lower team that have been struggling. And obviously, I'm delighted that Bournemouth won. You get to a certain point where you think, you know what, Bournemouth's kind of my second team, so I'm glad they won. But it's also like you just think, I don't know. You look at it and you think it seems like a logical decision, and it's one of them. But well, I got absolutely battered in the cup as well. Yeah,
85 points my opponent got.
Who's on your? If you were to make moves in this team, let's forget about the free hit. But if you were to make moves on your team, who are the players that are on your watch list or high in your agenda to bring into your team? If you said that now, right, 2 transfers, who would you do? Who'd you bring in?
Do you know what? It's sort of like falling behind a bit, but Zaha still, because now he's got a goal, and Palace's fixtures do look nice over the next 4 game weeks. They've got Newcastle, West Ham, Southampton, Norwich. So he's somebody that will be a nice little differential within, the context of our cash mini league.
Okay. I mean, really, Pulisic to Zaha. I mean, realistically, at best, you're probably going to miss out on what, 6 points. Like, I mean, I'm just thinking, like, is it really going to be worth that transfer for you? I mean, if that's Pulisic or something like that, I would assume. I would assume that you'd be doing the Pulisic switch to Zaha. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, possibly. Maybe get rid of Ali.
You've got Rico there, haven't you? You've got Rico there, so you could just bench. You could bench Alexander-Arnold for Rico. I mean, you could just play Greenwood, because I can see Greenwood getting minutes for Mane and just play that 3-4-3. I mean, you don't have to do a transfer. It's a risk, I know, with Greenwood, but I can see him getting minutes.
That's the irony. Go back to my my good old 3-4-3 that I used to love, and it will hopefully pay off. I mean, yeah, let's see. I guess it's kind of like when you have a poor game week, you just want to react, and like Pulisic has just frustrated the hell out of me. So you kind of want to do something. But I see what you're saying. I mean, Greenwood, obviously he's like 3 goals in the last 2 games. Rico,
yeah, he's ticking along, isn't he?
Rico is just when I visit Bournemouth next, I think I'll go and pay him a visit, because
remember last season when I told you about him, I was like, yeah, you got to get him in. You got to get him in. I was 1 season too early, mate. Sorry.
Well,
he just wasn't given the chances last year, was he? To be fair.
Well, 6 points this game week, and then 1 point the prior. and then before that he was on my bench again with 9 points when they
Yeah.
lost away to Palace because I couldn't believe it. I was just like, they lost and yet he still got 9 points, and he was. I had so many points from budget players
Well,
on my
someone's-
bench. It's just so.
I mean, what
and
about
I can't swear, but it's so annoying.
if you were to do anything? What about Pulisic to Richarlison then? And then instead of the downgrade to Zaha, because
Why is there a downgrade though? Because like,
well, when I say
Zaha's
downgrade,
fixtures are
no,
good.
I'm saying monetary wise.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, sure.
so instead of the switch to Zaha, why don't you go to Richarlison, who's also got really good fixtures, is in form. I mean, it's entirely your choice between the two.
You've got a point. I mean, I've got 8 million to play with. He's got Arsenal. We'll let him goals for fun against anyone. Then Burnley, then Newcastle, then City. Yeah, I mean,
it's interesting. I mean, your team's a good team, to be fair. I mean, let's just forget about the out of form Pulisic, but I can see Tammy Abraham doing something. I can definitely see Vardy doing something against City. Son, Ali. I mean, they're playing. They're literally involved in pretty much every Tottenham attack, even more so than Kane. Maddison, the fulcrum of that Leicester attack, easily could get something for you. Mane's obviously not playing. Is that Pulisic? Is that Pulisic just that you're annoyed about? But you don't necessarily have to do anything yet. I do think it's a case of just either gambling on one of Richarlison or even if you wanted to do a Zaha move like I've done. Lundstram, you're not going to move him out. Kelly, you're not going to move him out. Heaton's fine. Yeah, it's literally just bench TAA or bench Mane and TAA and just play Pulisic or do your transfer. That's what I'd do.
Yeah, it's sound advice. I mean, it is just what it's like. It's just frustrating when I've gone very premium with the midfield this season.
Is that out of form? Sorry,
I call them.
Ari Hiroki saying Pulisic is not out of form. Okay, Pulisic is not returning in recent game weeks any FPL points. So let me just rephrase it. So I mean, it's a case of how patient are you going to be on Pulisic? That's essentially the question that you've got to ask yourself.
Yeah, I mean,
because I was patient on Zaha. I've been patient on Zaha, and he's finally got me those points. They do come. Those points will come. It's just how patient you're going to be.
I mean, in response to that, I'd say, yeah, obviously he's a very good player. He was anonymous against Man City, which, okay, away to the champions, fair enough. But home, I mean, Chelsea are having a bit of a sticky patch at the moment. If you look at it, they've lost 3 out of the 4 last. Actually, 1, 2.
Since Jose took that, made that comment, wasn't it? It was like I saw a tweet about that. Since Jose said that something to the words of Chelsea are going to struggle against lesser opposition, blah blah blah. They have literally struggled.
Well, they lost 4 out of the last 5 Premier League games. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it makes Arsenal look like world beaters.
Oh, I don't know about that. Yeah, Arsenal and another. Literally, we haven't got long enough to talk about Arsenal, I'm afraid. But
no. Let's hear it.
Is it Arteta?
It's just I just nearly as apathetic about that as I am about my season in FPL. I've got nothing against Arteta. He seems like a good bloke and everything, but I think we need somebody experienced who's going to kind of put some of the players in their places.
This Ancelotti thing, maybe to Everton. I don't think so, but you'd take him over.
Yeah, Ancelotti would be great, but I think we're just kind of going for a cheaper option, a yes man. It's not to say that Arteta hasn't got potential to be a really good coach and step up, be a head coach, but at this moment in time, Ancelotti would be amazing, but it looks like he's going to Everton, so I think it is Arteta. I would say, as a betting man, I'd probably imagine Arteta will be in by the weekend.
A lot of people at Man City have got put him in high regard, Arteta, and could do well for you.
I hope so. Obviously, when he takes, when he takes over, I'll be behind him like any new manager. But it's just my preference would be Rafa Benitez.
What about Wenger?
No, but this is the thing. Everyone's coming out and saying that, and it does annoy me because Wenger should have gone 2004. That's when the rot set in. So,
well, I don't
yeah.
think it's all. You can't put all the blame on Wenger, unfortunately.
I'm not blaming it all on Wenger. I'm just saying, obviously, the board's a massive part. But
no, it is. And I think your problem does lie in with that board and that structure there. But that's a problem that's going to be a long-term solution, hopefully. But no, I'll be interested to see what happens in terms of managerial changes at Arsenal. And
I mean,
Arsenal is just like Star Wars, living off past glories and finished.
Well, as of now, Dan, you're 10th, and you are 7 points or whatever it is off 4th spot. It doesn't look like you're going to get anywhere near 4th, but what would you take this season?
Europa League, third time lucky.
Well,
Sorry, guys, on a completely different tangent. I'm just looking at the Liverpool team. I forgot they were.
Whoa, hang on. We've got. Whoa, hang on.
Wow.
Why is that not come through? Why has that not come through?
My friends just sent me. Oh my god! Some of these squad numbers is crazy.
What?
No way.
Hang on, sorry, Bruno. That I'm gonna have to play that again. I don't know why it's not come through, but.
Yeah, I take a Europa League win, but I don't think it'll happen because we'll probably get battered by like Inter Milan or Ajax or something. So.
Boona's just donated, did a super chat for £5, saying the person that reported you guys can shove it where the sun don't shine. Great to have you back, boys. Elite Army, hashtag Elite Army, hashtag Let's Go, hashtag Play Your Own Game, hashtag Sorry. Well, thank you, Boona. I'm not quite sure. I think it's because I switched it for Twitch, but I'll work out why that alert didn't come up on the screen. But thank you, Bruno. You didn't have to do that.
Cheers,
Thank you. And there you go. To the message to the person that reported us all those many weeks ago. Yes, I think we're starting to draw ourselves towards the final parts of this little stream. But it was you that, Dan. I said it earlier on the stream. It was you that actually alerted me.
Yeah,
that we were back.
Like I say, I do check the YouTube channel most days, and I wanted to recap on Sunday stream because I wasn't. I was in the bath actually when it was on live, and I thought and I had some food, and I was like, I missed it, and I thought I'll catch up on it, and then I seen the Man City Chelsea. I was thinking, hold on a minute, I know there's lots of games at the moment, but the penny kind of dropped there, and I thought maybe that means you guys are reinstated. So yeah. I mean, it's great.
Well, it was
just
Steve-O's stream.
As well.
Steve-O's stream came back. I was like, that means only one thing, that it's been released. So there, it's at least the system's working. It just takes way too long, in my opinion. I got a notification on my phone saying you were going live at YouTube at 3 p.m. today. Blame Steve-O for that one. I think Steve-O went live. I think you went live, didn't you, Steve-O, for like a second or something?
Possibly, I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So we're here now. Well, we're just about wrapping up, but we'll be back Thursday night for the preview, of course. Gameweek 18 preview, where we'll talk about the predictions. We'll go through. We'll hopefully have a special guest on the show as well to pit against us, and we look forward to taking a few callers on.
And actually, Boom has just made an interesting thing about the Oceania Breakfast Club. But in all seriousness, there is a point now, the fact we're back on YouTube and obviously we're going to be doing Twitch, that possibly for a week trial only or something, that I'll be doing solo morning shows and Jason will be doing live evening shows. Not on the same day, but it'll be just for a week just to see how it goes. Because as Jason said at the beginning of the stream, our lives are quite literally at the opposite ends of the scale. So it's just going to be a trial and everything. But yes, there will be a breakfast show at some point. I have no idea when, but just stay tuned on Twitter, I guess, and Discord.
Alex, thanks for letting us know that Final Fantasy Scout are going live in 10 minutes.
Final Fantasy Scout.
Purposely said it that way. I almost corrected myself.
What's your favourite Final Fantasy game, Jason?
I almost corrected myself, but you know what? I committed to it, and I thought, sod it. I'm not changing it. There you go.
Final Fantasy 7 was the best one.
There we go, guys. Final Fantasy Scout, check him out.
I just can't get over this Liverpool team. It's just the under 23s basically, but
anyway,
to expect.
I think we'll end it there.
Yes, yeah.
I think we'll end it there. Don't forget to if you haven't already, to hit us up on the interwebs on Twitter and Twitch. Hit that subscribe button, notification bell. Lets you know when we're live. I don't know why I would just reset chat. There you go. It's been a pleasure. Pleasure for having you on, Dan. Pleasure to join you, Steve-O, again on another live stream back on YouTube. It feels good to be back. It feels like we went away for too long. I'll see you Thursday night. Take care. Say goodbye.
Cheers, guys.